Now, I'm curious, though, about the continued participation of NBC. And I wrote this morning, Politico, you and I have talked about my problems with Politico, but I view them as generally fair, though, to the left of center. I think NBC is just full of hacks and people who will never be fair, including Chris Matthews and others who will distort the whole news environment. Is there concern?
Well, we must just have a disagreement about Brian Williams, who I've known and worked.
I didn't say Brian.
For 15 years.
I didn't say Brian Williams.
The Clinton White House together.
John, I agree with you. I didn't say
he's a very, very solid,
John.
ideological journalist.
John, that's a complete diversion. I didn't say Brian Williams. I said Chris Matthews, and the fact that there are partisans within NBC that will so distort the environment there that it would inevitably distort their news gathering. Is it right for the Republicans to be concerned about a news organization that has that deeply and embedded bias in it?
Well, I just don't accept the premise. I don't accept your premise about Chris Matthews, who I admire. I think
I admire him too, but he's a lefty.
Well, I don't think, in any event, Chris Matthews is not the moderator of this debate. Brian Williams. It's Brian Williams who is going to be bringing his journalistic reputation, his journalistic values to bear, just as I will be, Hugh, as the other moderator.
But I got to ask you, though, just objectively, if you're walking down the hallways and seeing each other and working intimately at the highest levels with Ed Schultz and Chris Matthews and Rachel Maddow and Larry, and I've interviewed most of these people, and they're fine left-wing lefties, but aren't they going to have an impact on the news product of NBC?
I don't think those people who do come at the news from an ideological point of view, they're commentators, people like Rachel Maddow, are going to be influencing Brian Williams as he puts his imprint on the debate, and as the two of us together try to come up with the questions that we think will be most illuminating for the audience.
John, how many years?
I don't think that.
How many years have you been in newsrooms?
I've been in newsrooms about 25 years.
That's what I thought. Now, doesn't the makeup of the newsroom, the people who actually live and work and breathe there and interact, influence everyone that's there? Maybe it's a matter of degrees, but over the years, doesn't it inevitably, if you've got Chris Matthews, would you agree, is a very liberal commentator?
I don't see Chris as being as predictable in his views.
That wasn't the question.
As you do.
Is he very liberal?
Is he very liberal? I just don't see what that has to do with Brian Williams' journalistic.
I'll get there, but I got to establish the predicate, though. Do you think he's very liberal, or is there some reason you don't want to say that?
I think he should answer the question of whether he is or not.
But you see, if we can't,
what the relevance to my view of whether what counts as very liberal or somewhat liberal or not liberal, I'm not sure I get that.
This is why the audience doesn't trust NBC or a debate like this that NBC's in there, because if we can't name...
Do you mind if I ask a question here?
You bet. Go ahead.
Do you think that Fox News could ever sponsor a fair... democratic debate with somebody like Chris Wallace, who has established a reputation as a non-ideological journalist as moderator?
Yes, but they would never allow it
because
yes,
that
John,
would never be done because they have conservative commentators.
No, John, I think that Fox could do it absolutely, but the Democratic Party would never allow it, and therefore the Republican Party ought not to allow it on this side, because if you're going to keep the ideologically involved on the right away from the Democratic Party, you ought to keep the ideologically involved on the left, NBC, away from the Republican Party.
Well,
it's just fair.
I don't agree with that. I just don't agree with that, and I just don't welcome a climate where people think that no journalist, including for places like NBC, with an established decades-long reputation for straight journalism, can't.
John, I'll give you the last minute.
Fairly, I don't see the entire world operating through an ideological.
Do you think MSNBC?
Sometimes when I listen to you, Hugh, I think that they do. Anyway, I think Brian Williams' journalistic values and his reputation and his record speak for themselves.
Do you think MSNBC is left wing?
I think in their commentators, they certainly do.
And does it have an impact on NBC then as a result?
I don't think it does.
All right, John, that's the big difference between you and me, and I think the reason why There's still going to be continued concern over a debate that at least now is at the right time. Now we can just work on getting some other people in there who might represent my side of the aisle and not just Brian and NBC's side of the aisle. Could be good. John Harris from Politico.com. Always a pleasure. Thank you, John. It's the You Give It show. Whatever you do, do not miss Tomorrow, America. One of the greatest novelists of our generation, Stephen Pressfield, author of The Gates of Fire, joins me again to talk about his brand new novel and about the warrior ethic. But I got to close by going back to my John Harris interview. I played it twice today because I'm so astonished. I like Politico, I like Harris, I like all these people, but if they cannot see the obvious thing, that NBC is a hard left organization that inevitably draws everyone into the whirlpool of its leftism, how can you believe that they can get the hard stuff right? If you can't just say, yeah, Chris is from the far side of the left-wing moon, and I love him anyway, why can't you just say that? Why can't we all agree? That's why Washington, D.C. can't add. That's why Washington, D.C. cannot multiply. That's why Washington, D.C. cannot articulate a rule on the war. It's why the Beltway Manhattan media elite is so disconnected from America, didn't understand the Tea Party, doesn't understand anything. It's because they cannot bring themselves to say anything about each other, about the tribe inside the Beltway. And believe me, this is a tribe that includes Republicans and Democrats. This is a tribe that includes Hal Rogers and appropriators who want to go back and sit down with Dick Durbin and Chuck Schumer and schmooze it up and come up with some, so that the tribe is inside the Beltway. Not everyone inside the Beltway is part of the tribe. Absolutely not. My friends at AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, they're not in the tribe. My friends from Hillsdale College, get your Imprimis. I meant to tell you about that earlier today. Imprimis, you got to sign up for it. Go to Larry Arnn. Is going to have a great economic freedom seminar. You can sign up for that at hughhewitt.com. The Hillsdale, they have an office in the Beltway, but they are not of the Beltway. They are in the Beltway, and they are not of the Beltway. Reminds me of a great book by an author whose name I cannot remember, In But Not Of. You ought to go look that up and order it right now. In But Not Of, probably one of the greatest books ever written in the last 20 years. In But Not Of. But that's what we need in journalist circles, is we need journalists in the Beltway, but not of it. And unfortunately, they're all of it. So today, a great victory was won. Republicans stood up to the Politico and NBC and said, no, we're not going to dance to your tune. We'll love to come to the Reagan Library. We'll show up in September. We're not going to play to your tune. I still hope they say no. I don't mind having Brian Williams on a panel, but Brian Williams and John Harris represent about 1/10 of the political spectrum in America. 1/10. It's the 10th that is left of center to somewhat left of center. Now, they're not as far left of center as Chris Matthews. They're not over the edge like Ed Schultz, but they're left of center. Why should the Reagan Library allow that? What is wrong with having a conservative ask conservative questions, or a center-right conservative like Fred Barnes or Britt Hume participate? Why in the world do we do this? I'll keep preaching it.